just listening to the woodwind stylings of Kristin Naigus, an amazingly talented musician who played something like 10 or 12 different instruments on Moss Book 2. Now, Kristin's actually no stranger to the world of Moss because she also played all of the woodwinds that you heard from Moss Book 1. She literally plays everything from the C flute, alto flute, oboe, English horn, bass clarinet, bassoon, a pseudo contrabassoon that we'll get into a little later in the video, and a whole slew of penny whistles. I feel like she has penny whistles the way a harmonica player has harps in different keys. Like, she shows up to a recording session, she's like, you need penny whistle? Opens up her coat, I got every key of penny whistle. What do you need? You need D sharp? I'm ready. You need B natural? I'm totally good to go. She's a bit of an instrument hoarder, very much like myself. And fortunately, I am also a bit of a microphone hoarder. My experience with her incredible penny whistle playing on an expansion we did for the original Moss taught me that maybe we needed some specific microphones for those penny whistles. After all, they're very small, they're very loud, and they can cut through some analogy of something cutting through something, like a hot knife through butter. That'll work. After a bunch of microphones were mailed to and from Kristin's studio, we settled on 2 microphones that ended up being perfect for the penny whistle. The AKG C414B ULS. I'm only mentioning all those geeky letters because this is an older AKG from the late 80s that still has the transformer in it. Very warm, very neutral, and very flat. And also a Royer 121 ribbon mic. Also very warm, very neutral, and very flat. As luck would have it, those 2 microphones also sounded absolutely fantastic on all of her other woodwind instruments. What I consider the greatest strength of Moss is also one of its biggest challenges for me personally, and that's that so much is played live. And it's not played live with all of us sitting in a room at a recording studio and playing together. We're all recording ourselves in our separate small rooms, something I'm sure many of you can relate to. So Kristin was recording her woodwinds in her studio at her home, and I was recording all of my percussion, guitar, ukulele, accordion, and everything else in what was my master bedroom at the time because this studio was under construction. Same thing goes for the guitars and the cello. So it fell to me to take all of these instruments and figure out a way to make them sound like they were in the same space, to make them feel like they were one ensemble playing together, and not individual musicians all over the world recording themselves in isolation. I thought we could take a look at all the incredible woodwinds that Kristin recorded for Moss Book 2 and how they were treated for the final soundtrack. So here are the 2 microphones for Kristin's alto flute. Let's just listen to the 121 ribbon on its own. Such a beautiful sound. I love all of her instruments through both of these microphones, but especially the 121. Didn't have to do a whole lot to it. Tiny bit of EQ, a little bit of filtering, some general compression just to keep things in line, and a tiny bit of corrective EQ. Now, if I add the other channel and include the reverb, we get this. I ended up using the 480 on all of the woodwinds. There's just something about this verb that worked really well with the recordings from Kristin. Here's the whole phrase with the other woodwinds coming in towards the end and some cello accompaniment down here at the bottom. So those woodwinds are sort of the medium range of the woodwind ensemble in Moss 2. We also have the Irish whistles that are definitely the top range, and then the low woodwinds that are the low range. I really wanted the whistles to have a sense of magic and wonder, but also feel mysterious at the same time. Now, Kristin did the magic thing automatically. I sent her these really lame MIDI parts, and she played the notes that I sent, but she did all these additional idiomatic kinds of turns and bends and things that you just hear those types of whistles doing. So it's sort of like, okay, magic, box ticked, check. But the mysterious kind of thing I ended up using effects for. Some interesting delays and reverbs and processing tricks that we're going to get into next. So here we've got the low whistle part from Kristin as well as the high whistle part up here. Let's just listen to the low first. And that's just a little complementary whistle on the high part, an octave up. Definitely happy with that recording compared to what we tried to do years before. With the new mics, it makes all the difference in the world. I think the EQ that I had on this looked like this. Well, there you have it. Now what I did, instead of using a proper EQ to get the sort of effect that I was going for, I did an old trick using a delay. But instead of using any sort of echo time at all, I set it to 0 delay. There's no delay going on, and the mix is at 100%. So what you're getting is the process signal going through the delay, which I have set to telephone. Much cooler. And not quite as easy to get if you were going to just use a standard EQ. I've also got the high cut all the way down, the low cut up about midway, and some saturation. Again, without it. And with it. Now I wanted to do a little more with the otherworldly kind of sounds. And there it is. I also added a proper delay with a really long ping pong. And here's both whistles. So we've got the low whistle panned left, the high whistle panned right, and then they're ping-ponging the delays once they go through that processor. Now the very last thing I did was I ran both whistles through a master bus that consisted of a nice low cut, because it's all high information, don't need any of that, as well as the Lexicon 480 and just some general EQ to help with some of those more resonant peaks. You can hear the feedback on that delay is turned up pretty high, but I wanted it to have that sort of foresty magic. I don't know any other way to describe it besides foresty magic. We can hear it in the context of the entire mix. Last, but certainly not least, we have the low woodwinds. Now with the low woodwinds, I was trying to find something that could musically portray evil in the game. And I didn't want it to be this over-the-top kind of thing with crazy harmonies or dissonance. I wanted a texture where when you heard the texture, you immediately were like, oh, wait a minute, yeah, I know something's going down now. And the heart of that texture is the low woodwinds. So here are the 4 different passes that Kristin did for me on low woodwinds. Let's listen to each one. Now this is the same thing duplicated down. I used it as a contrabassoon pass and dropped it an octave, but there's no plugins on it yet, so it's going to sound exactly the same, except it's centered. This is pretty much what all the channels have, just a low cut, which I'm going to go ahead and turn on, as well as some light compression and a little bit of resonance taming. Honestly, I think you can hear it better if you listen to everyone before and after. And notice you're hearing that bassoon drop thanks to Little Altar Boy on the two bottom tracks. I also sent everything through both the Bricastis, one on the room far and the other on my large hall. And then everything is actually routed through a low woodwind distortion, which has Devil Lock Deluxe on it, which gives it some grit, but not too much. Okay, maybe a little more grit than I remember. So here's the whole ensemble before any effects with the faux contrabassoon being transposed down. And here's everything with the compression and the EQ going through the reverb and also going through the Devil Lock Deluxe. I feel like I should play you the entire section, which is our low woodwinds here, summed down to a stereo file, plus I've got a cello with a nice effect on it. As well as my Fender bass, going through some type of a fuzz. So those three together, you get the full picture. And here's those same three tracks in the context of the full mix. Maybe you haven't been able to tell, but I really love woodwinds. It's sad that they're so underutilized these days, but maybe this video has given you some ideas of how you can incorporate them into your own projects. And even if you're not using woodwinds, hopefully you picked up a couple of tips and tricks just to have some fun with in your own music.